So
Right.
obviously the optical interface isn't terribly interesting because it's one per customer. So we're not doing anything terribly complicated so far. Where it gets more interesting is when we start looking at the other resources. So partly just to try and make sure we get to the end of this before we run out of time, I'm now going to create the other 3 resources. We'll load in all the assumptions and then we'll wire them up.
Okay.
So 3 more resources, 1, 2, 3, and actually I'm going to give myself a bit more room. I'm going to just rearrange the screen. Oops. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So these ones, let me rename them. So we want the access card, the access chassis, and the uplink. And one quite convenient trick you can do is if you select all 4 of the resources first and then go to the menu, actually you get a dialog for all the 4 elements together side by side, which is quite convenient because it just makes it easier to kind of compare the assumptions. So I'm going to basically just type in the numbers from here quickly just because we need to get it all done. So the access card, this is the thing into which each customer is plugging. So that also has a capacity imports. And its capacity is 16. Now the chassis, its capacity isn't in ports, it's how many cards can I fit in the chassis. So its capacity is cards, and the answer is 5. And then the uplink, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's completely different. Its capacity is actually in terms of how fast it goes. So its capacity is in gigabits per second, and it has a capacity of 1 gig.
1 gig.
And physical lifetime, basically they're all 10 years apart from the access card. The access card is the thing which is more likely to fail from time to time. So it has a lifetime of 5 years. So those are the physical assumptions. And then I go back here and we go to costs. And the access card costs 5,000, a bit cheap really, but never mind, as does the access chassis. And then the uplink costs 10,000. And they all have the same requirement of 5% of capex. Now, if you look at this formula, it doesn't say optical interface.capex, it just says capex. It knows that it's a reference to the capital cost within the same element. And we have a similar, it's not quite the same, but a similar concept of a relative reference as you have in Excel. In STEM, the way it works is that if your formula reference is within the same element, it's assumed to be relative to the element. And that means if I copy it here and then do a paste here, it actually assumes that the copied formula should also have a reference to the same element. So the capital here refers to the access card's capital cost. And it basically means I can go across the whole row, paste them all at once, and you'll see that they get different numbers based on their own individual capital costs.
That's right.
Okay. So those are the resources. That's the easy part. We've captured the capacities and the lifetimes and the costs. The interesting bit is then how we drive them. So